Welcome back to another Unplayable card review. Before we dive into this week's card, I want to announce last week's giveaway winner. Thanks to everyone who participated. I appreciate all of the comments, some of which definitely gave me a chuckle. That said, this week's winner is jtyra4887. Congratulations! You should have received an email from me already, and as soon as I can get a valid shipping address, we'll get that pack sent to you right away. There will be another giveaway at the end of this video, so stay tuned if you want to enter that. Moving on, I'm very excited to talk about this week's card, as it was requested by two different viewers on the channel, Lord Lantern 599 and Paralos1329. As you can see from their comments, this week's review will cover Allure of the Unknown. Allure of the Unknown is a 5-mana sorcery spell that costs 3 generic, 1 black, and 1 red mana. It reads, reveal the top 6 cards of your library. An opponent exiles a non-land card from among them, then you put the rest into your hand. That opponent may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. In terms of card per mana spent, this is actually good value. Essentially, you pay 5 mana to add 5 cards to your hand, and uncharacteristically for Rakdos, those cards won't cost you any life. Of course, there are some significant downsides to consider. First, the cards you're drawing are revealed to your opponents. This may not matter much, but giving your opponents free information is never ideal. Second, and more importantly, while you do get to keep 5 of the 6 cards revealed, one of your opponents gets to cast one of those cards, very likely the best one, for free. That said, I think there are more than a few ways you can either completely get around this downside or even turn it into an upside. Let's talk about it. First, I want to talk about Group Slug. While there is some overlap, generally speaking, Group Slug is the opposite of Group Hug. While Group Hug plays beneficial spells that help everyone draw cards and play spells, Group Slug typically builds around punishing effects that negatively affect or damage players anytime they take a game action. The most popular style of Group Slug is typically built around drawing cards. Commanders like Nekusar the Mind Racer or Shieldred the Apocalypse, for example, will make any Rhystic Study player squirm. Cards like Mana Barbs and Polluted Bonds are also considered Group Slug cards, as they punish players for playing and using their lands. Group Slug also includes cards that specifically punish players for casting spells. These are the cards I think work best with Allure of the Unknown. Once you have a few of these cards in play, letting your opponents put something on the stack for free might not actually be that bad. And there are lots of cards that do this, though most of them only trigger when certain kinds of spells are cast. Gleeful Arsonist, Scab Clan Berserker, Maddening Hex, Cindervines, Kambal Council of Allocation, Magebane Lizard, Rurik Thar the Unbound, Shadow in the Warp, Eidolon of the Great Revel, Scalding Viper, or Aether Sting, just to name a few. While all of these cards work well with Allure of the Unknown, there are 3 specific hate pieces that work exceptionally well: Roiling Vortex, Adrenaline Jockey, and Scytheclaw Raptor. These cards were designed to specifically punish things like counterspells and or free spells, but they pair perfectly with Allure of the Unknown. And of course, the best versions of this effect trigger when any spell is cast. My favorites include Tovalar's Mage Hunter, Painful Quandary, Cemetery Gatekeeper, and Liesa Shroud of Dusk. There are also 2 commanders, both in Rakdos, that are doing this exact thing: Kervek the Merciless and Lord of Pain. I absolutely love Allure of the Unknown in these decks. Sure, your opponents will get to cast one of your cards for free, but you still get to keep the other 5 and get to throw out some damage in return. And if you've got a damage doubler or tripler in play, there's a good chance your opponent will choose not to cast anything. Some other Group Slug commanders who could consider adding Allure of the Unknown include Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls, Yurlok of Scorched Thrash, Mogus, God of Slaughter, Indoraptor, the Perfect Hybrid, and Parnis, the Subtle Brush. Moving on, the next deck archetype I want to talk about is what I call light stacks. Unlike a dedicated stacks deck that might run brutal cards like Stasis and Winter Orb, I'm referring to cards that are more often used to force players to play fair magic. Cards like Lavinia, Azorius Renegade, Boromir, Warden of the Tower, and Vexing Bauble, for instance. These cards are great at shutting down free spells like Fierce Guardianship, Force of Will, Deflecting Swat, Flare of Fortitude, and more. I've got a buddy who absolutely hates spells like these, and they actually built a deck with as many ways as possible to turn them off. If you share that sentiment and have some of these cards in your decks, Allure of the Unknown is definitely worth considering. Since Allure lets your opponent cast a spell from your top 6 for free, that spell will immediately be countered if you have any of these cards in play. Other cards that could also counter the free spell from Allure of the Unknown include Jin Gitaxias, Progress Tyrant, Void Mirror, and the emblem from Jace, Unraveler of Secrets. Cards that prevent your opponents from casting spells on your turn will also work here, like Defense Grid, Grand Abolisher, Xantid Swarm, Conqueror's Flail, Voice of Victory, Kutsil, Malamet Exemplar, Myrel Shield of Argive, Dragonlord Dramoka, and Tidal Barracuda, just to name a few. Cards like Drannith Magistrate and Soulless Jailer that stop players from casting spells from exile will also work. While some would argue that this strategy is a little unfun, if it's your cup of tea and you're in the right colors, you should definitely consider adding Allure of the Unknown. Some commanders that have access to Rakdos and may already be doing a strategy like this include Niv Mizzet Guild Pact, which is actually the commander for my friend's deck I mentioned earlier, Alesha who smiles at death, Malik Grim Manipulator, Yurlok of Scorched Thrash, Saskia the Unyielding, and more. Now, so far the strategies I've talked about are both looking for ways to either minimize or counter the downside of Allure of the Unknown, but the nature of a 4-player game lends itself to another option: politics. Unless you are currently the archenemy of the table, you could easily make a deal with another player to use the free spell they get to cast from Allure of the Unknown to answer a problem on the table. Of course, how can you guarantee that you'll hit an answer in your top 6 cards? Top deck manipulation. If you're playing a deck that lets you look at the top card of your library, or even better, put cards from your hand on top of your library, you can leverage this to make extremely beneficial deals with the Allure of the Unknown. For example, let's say the table desperately needs a board wipe. You could make a deal with another player that if you find a board wipe in your top 6, that's the spell they'll cast with the Allure of the Unknown. Then put a board wipe on top of your library with something like Brainstorm or Mystical Tutor. This essentially lets you draw 5 cards and your opponent cast the card you wanted to cast anyways. Even without a way to directly put a card on top of your library, you can use cards like Sensei's Divining Top or Lens of Clarity to leverage whatever card is on top of your library to make a deal. Something like, hey, I've got an Infernal Grasp on top of my deck. If I choose you with Allure of the Unknown, would you cast my Infernal Grasp to remove the Elish Norn Grand Cenobite that's currently making our lives miserable? I bet you most players would take that deal. While I can't list all of the cards that let you look at and manipulate the top card of your library, some of my favorites that haven't already been mentioned include Conch Horn, Assemble the Players, Miri's Guile, Fortune Teller's Talent, Cemetery Illuminator, Information Dealer, Descendant of Sora Maro, and the Grim Captain's Locker. Let me know in the comments below if I left any of your favorite top deck manipulation cards off my list. Some commanders who may be doing something in this strategy and have access to red and black include Hidetsugu Devouring Chaos, the infamous Cruel Claw, Francisco Foul Marauder paired with any red partner, Vevictus Asmodi the Dire, and Kalia Zenith Seeker. Finally, to round out this review, I want to briefly mention 3 additional ideas, honorable mentions that could consider trying this card. The first is a style of deck I feel like I bring up a lot on this channel: Bad Gifts. If your top 6 cards is loaded with garbage that your opponent doesn't want, like Darylore, which I featured in my last review, then Allure of the Unknown is largely free. Blim Comedic Genius is the obvious commander here, and currently only around 9% of Blim decks are running Allure of the Unknown, and that should probably be a little higher. Second, when a player casts a spell with X in its cost for free, the X is set to 0. That means that if your best spells all have X in their costs, your opponents won't be able to really use them, meaning you basically get around Allure of the Unknown's downside altogether. Unfortunately, Rakdos isn't exactly known for this strategy, though Rowan Sign of War and Rakdos Lord of Riots could work here. Finally, I have a goofy deck built around Rakdos Patron of Chaos that I call Opponent's Choice Typal, where the goal is to force my opponents to make bad decisions for me. My deck is full of weird cards like Fatal Lore, Choice of Damnations, Explosion of Riches, Illicit Auction, Pain's Reward, Oracle of Bones, and more. And while the deck is already really good at drawing cards, I actually think I'm going to add Allure of the Unknown as another fun on-theme option. And if you want me to do a full breakdown of my Rakdos Patron of Chaos deck, Let me know in the comments below and I'll put something together. Alright, with all that said, it's time we ask the question, is Allure of the Unknown unplayable in the Commander format? No, I don't think so. It's not the best draw spell I've ever seen, but I do love the flavor and plan on trying it in some of my decks. I give it 3 dumpsters out of 7. But of course, I want to know what you think. Do you have another deck idea that could make this card truly shine? Let me know what you think in the comments below and feel free to leave suggestions for cards you want me to review in the future. Okay, now let's talk about this week's giveaway. Like before, we're giving away another Final Fantasy booster pack. To enter, you've got to do 2 things. First, if you haven't yet, fill out the form in the description of this video to share your email address and YouTube username with me. This will let me contact the winner of the giveaway to get their shipping address. Once you've done that, simply leave a comment on this video for a chance to win. I'll announce the winner in my next Unplayable card review. And while you do not need to be subscribed to win, I do hope you'll hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos or giveaways. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.